my mom, she got a warrant, and it was one of my best friends that had wore the wire on her. It was a dude that I was on a wrestling team with. Like, we were boys, and he wore a wire on my mom for 9 Lortabs.
Crime Talk 369, prison stories on the line, New York rhythm in the spine. If you did it or you didn't, you gon' feel it in this rhyme.
You
Do you
know.
think drugs completely changed your personality?
Oh yeah, hell yeah. I'd say a good example is, I would have pretty much like, your emotions are all out of whack the whole time, you do drugs. And I'm young, I'm still developing as, a young dude. And the hormones are crazy for any young man, but especially doing uppers and downers, I really thought like these fits of rage I was going into, and just not being able to control my temper, I really thought like those outbursts and shit were just a part of my life, you know.
Did you ever think you were going to die?
Oh, well, at this point, I hadn't got into messing with the hard opiates yet. But, at this point, I didn't think I was going to die. I hadn't really been around anybody that died. I was just, trying to make money, and I loved the attention. I loved being, that guy. And eventually, we get evicted from that place too. And we're bouncing around, and actually during that period, I lose my virginity to one of like my mom's clientele, this lot lizard bitch. That was a crazy story, but here I am, like 13, and I was just had it in my head. I was just so unhappy with myself and thought life was so short. I said, I'm gonna lose my virginity to this bitch, because why? I mean, this is gonna be my opportunity. Why not take it?
Would you call her a lizard? Does that
Lot
mean
lizard.
she
What are
looked
the
like a?
bitches that sell pussy at the truck stop?
That's what they call them.
Yeah, lot lizard.
Dang, I didn't know
That's
that.
but we're bouncing around, and eventually we move into a house that is owned by a sheriff. And that starts a whole crazy cycle of events, and just all the characters in my life. This is when I'm in one of like my first raids. Really is, we're at the house chilling, and we were in this place for like only 4 months before we were about to get kicked out again. Just the traffic. And at the time, I had this like bug connect that would just come and throw like a pound on me. You know what I mean? And just like, it was way too much. I drew way too much attention, and ultimately, is I feel kind of responsible for us losing that place. But anyway, we noticed some people coming to the door, and I see their badges hanging on their necklace, and we shove everything into one of those big black TVs. The old school ones. We shove everything in the VCR of that bitch. And all my big homies was it was crazy. A couple of my big homies was there, and they drag us all outside, and honestly, bro, I start trying to show off for them. I'm yelling at the cops, I'm fucking stripping down, and I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm doing way too much, because like all my like older homies was there. Looking back, I should have ate concrete that day, but I kept stealing cigarettes from my mom during the raid, and they charged me with the underage possession of tobacco. So that was my first, real charge.
Hold on.
But
So they were doing a raid on your house, and you were sneaking over and stealing cigarettes from your mom?
no, yeah, my mom, she had got out when they sh- made us go all out to the parking lot. She had grabbed her lighter and her cigarettes, and she wouldn't give me one, so I kept running over there and stealing them. And
And
the
they
cop
charged you
kept,
for that?
yeah, and the cop kept taking them from me. And he said, "I catch you taking one more, I'm gonna charge you." And I ran over and took one more, and they charged me. There was also a scenario too. I didn't go to jail, but it was on the news and shit, where like I was in the 8th grade and got caught with these ecstasy pills. I never even got to try them, but like, I was just like selling them to this kid, and I had sold him, some bud and some ecstasy pills, and he brought them back. He had got scared and brought them back to me and was like, "I don't want this," and I said, "Well, you're not getting your fucking money back." And I didn't flush it or nothing. I like hid it in a plant, and they fucking found it with the dog, and it was like on the thing, like eighth
What
grader at
did
school.
he tell him? He told on
Yeah,
you?
yeah, fuck yeah, he told him. But
Yeah, they always do. How much money would you say you were spending on your habit daily back
well,
then?
at this point, I'm at this point, the majority of like the fasts and shit, household shit, and somebody going and getting a box of Sudafed. So that wasn't that much money. My pain pill habit, pretty much I would just do them, when my mom got her script. And as far as, bud and the psychedelics and stuff, I pretty much was just using out of whatever I was selling. So, this hadn't got to like the real bad part yet anyway, but at this point, we moved down to the country, like thinking everything's going to be better, from in town down to a more secluded part of our town,
In West
you
Virginia?
know, and no, in Virginia, in the
Virginia, okay.
Blacksburg area. And when we moved down there, we meet like a whole new branch of people, because I'm just trying to stop us from being homeless again. After you've been homeless with your mom and your niece and stuff so many times, I was trying to be a man and to help us find a place, but really, I took us to somewhere that ultimately, caused us a lot more problems. But we moved down there, and that's where I meet, my baby mama and my wife. And her mom, gets 180 30s a month, and uh, um 100 milligram fentanyl patches. So you add that to what my mom's getting and everything I'm doing, and it's just it's a lot going on. But anyway, at some point, while we're down there, two major stories I'll tell you about while we're down there. We go down there thinking that we're going to not be dealing with the police as much. And I come to realize that, my mom, she got a warrant, and it was one of my best friends that had wore the wire on her. It was a dude that I was on a wrestling team with. Like, we were boys, and, he wore a wire on my mom for 9 Lortabs. And, my mom, she always kind of resented me for that, because she was like, how could you bring this person around, But when you're a kid, you're not a very good judge of character yet. Another story that happened down there was, I had just met, who's my wife now, and you know, my mom, she didn't take the Xanaxes, and she wasn't making much money off of them, so she was splitting between me and my sister. And my sister ends up stealing my half. And I said, but I had just done like 10 of them, the blue football one. And I start freaking out, breaking shit all over the house. And my mom ends up having to call the cops. And I wake up in a juvenile psych ward. Stay there for a few days, and they let me out. Well, while I'm in there, another girl that was a juvenile, she trips out on Xanaxes and comes to the same facility I'm at. And but we were both fucked up on Xanaxes, and the cops go and talk to the girl who came there, and she tells them that she got them from my mom. And that was another time my mom got in trouble, and she ended up fighting that case for years. But eventually shit goes south there. The power goes out. My mom, she's fighting cases. She has to worry about fighting cases, and just has to basically get the fuck away from all of us. And that pretty much put me in a position where she left me down there, and I'm 15, and she tells me that she's going somewhere to take a shower because they cut the water off. Well, she goes and turns herself into a psych ward herself, and that's the last I hear of her for months. But I end up with my baby
So
mama's
one day y'all at the house, she said she's gonna go take a shower, and did she just checks herself into a psych ward? You never You don't know what's going on or nothing?
I don't know what's going on, and I'm 15. I'm not old enough to work. I have like no way to make money on my own or nothing.
So
I'm
who's
just
at the
fucking
house with you
stuck.
guys?
That's how I pretty much get hooked up with my baby mama, because the people's house we was living in was her mom and hers. You know, they had a downstairs apartment and we was living in the downstairs and they lived out upstairs. And she knew me and the daughter, we already was seeing each other, and so she just left me there, I guess, assuming that they would take care of me, and they pretty much did. Her mom, pretty much called me one of her own. And at the time, I wanted to be where them 30s was. So anyway, so it worked out, but I didn't plan for my mom to just leave me. And when you're 15, you got no way to work or anything, no way to make money for yourself. It comes a time, and eventually, we're staying there with no lights and no water for about 3 months. And then my mom calls me and she's like, "Hey, I just got approved for my disability. So you want to come to the hotel?" And I eventually, she go to the hotel she's at and start staying with her. And I talk my girl into the girl that I'm seeing, whose house we're staying with, no lights and no water. I'm like, fuck that, just come over and stay with me. And around that time, we're hanging out, we're living in the hotel. My mom had just got, her disability. And anybody, when they first get their disability, it's a substantial amount of money. And, looking back, I should have sat her down and been like, let's buy a trailer. Let's like do something that's going to last. But, before all this, she had never been in trouble in her life. She's fighting to distribution. She's like, why am I going to buy a trailer if I'm going to just lose it when I get locked up anyway? So that pretty much starts a 3 month thing of like, we basically are just chilling, getting high till the money's gone. And at a certain point, the girl I'm with, my dad had gave us a car, and the title to the car, and the car was at the house down there with no lights and no water. And we were like, she's fighting with her mom because she done decided to come stay with me. So we're like, all right, we're gonna go get that car. Well, she goes in there to get it. Her mom calls the cops, and she goes to jail that day. And I have to bond her out. And after that, my mom had ran out of money, so it's just me and my baby mama, and we're thugging it. We got a car that's illegal as fuck. The plates are bad, windows busting out, there's no inspection sticker, but we're pretty much forced to live in this bitch. And around the same time, I started getting a social security check that kids get, when they're on ADHD. So no, I mean, it's social security, but you start getting it, because I started getting it because I was had ADHD. And that pretty much helped us stay afloat for the most part. And I get her pregnant, and we start staying with these old heads, that we used to just sell shit to. And eventually I get her pregnant, and we decide, get my first job at Shoney's. If anybody knows what Shoney's is, it's a buffet. And at this point, I'm doing like Roxy's every day. And I still have an ice habit. And I really had a fucked up version of, I thought I was going to be able to make a life, have a job, be a family man. And, if I did drugs, once my kids were asleep, that was my business. But anyway, I'm also trying to finish high school. I'm only in the 10th grade at this point, too. I'm living 2 towns over. I'm trying to work 40 hours a week. So, we do that struggle. I'm, keeping up with my habit. I finish high school. We have my little boy, 14 days after he's born, me and my girl get in a huge fight because, I had she told me she had to leave for some shit, but she had left to go get some shit and not told me about it, and stayed gone for a day, and I had to call out of work. And I had just got this job at Walmart. And so when she got back, I'm freaking out. And eventually somebody calls the cops. I end up getting in a fight with the dude she's with, and my dad comes and gets me.
The baby is only a couple, like a week old or something, 2 weeks
No,
old.
he's 9 months old.
Okay, and you just got the job, and she just runs off, stays with somebody else, another guy, when you're supposed to be at
Yeah.
work for your first time. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I get back and I'm tripping, and eventually the cops get called, and they separate us, and she put a protective order on me or whatever, and the kid had to stay with her because he was in her arms. So I leave or whatever, and later on that night, I go to my cousin's. The next day, my cousin's girl works at the hospital in the dietary department, making trays and shit, and she sees my girl's name for a tray, and, calls me and goes and checks her out, and she's on a respirator. What happened that night was the dude that I had gotten a fight with, apparently, they had something had happened and they got in a car wreck with my son in the back seat. And when they both tested him because they had stuff in their system and she had a protective order on me, they put him in foster care. And
Dang.
so I had just did all this shit, bro. I had thought I'd done the most challenging shit. I graduated, I had a job, I had my own trailer, and just to lose my boy because
Yeah.
he was everything I was doing it for. And at that time, I continue to keep my job somehow, but we're still using, and shit just gets real bad. Her mom, like, at a little bit before all that happened, we lived in a trailer park with her mom. We lived across from the trailer park. We had decided to move in with her mom because it'd be a lot cheaper. You know, we just had the kid, but I eventually, we're moving when we lose our son, we're living with her mom. And her mom, after we lose our son, falls into a coma, and she falls into a coma and gets this shit called necrotizing fasciitis. It's like it's an infection in the blood. And she ends up losing like four of her toes and like all of her fingers on one side. And it is in a coma for like 3 months. And
Damn.
in that 3 months, my girl's sister stole the card with the disability money on it, and I couldn't pay all the bills at that house by myself, you know.
And how old are you
So
at this time?
I had just graduated. I was just turned 18.
Man, it's like your whole life, man. It's like you're doing, as a kid, you're doing all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing as an adult, man. You're
Yeah, and so I couldn't pay the bills, so we're pretty much riding it out till we get kicked out. As shit goes, the power gets cut off, then we get evicted, and I'm working at Walmart while we're living in our car, and our connection to the drugs, because her mom pretty much helped us supply our habit. She's in a coma, so it was a bad time. I didn't have a good connection or anything. Around this time we start staying in a hotel with this dude, this old man. He owned a hotel, but it was like the only reason we got to stay there and he would let me stay there is because like he would let me. Yeah, the rooms were like $50 a night, and obviously I didn't have that working at Walmart. And he like wanted to fuck my baby mama so bad, and he would try to like get me drunk. I swear, he eventually, years down the road, ended up, getting in trouble for SA a woman, you know. But so
dang.
that's just how bad shit is. And at a certain point, her mom wakes up from the coma and wants out of the hospital. So we bring her from the hospital to, a hotel room. That creates chaos. And her sister has always been someone who's made problems in our life, and she comes back from living in Texas and everything's fucked up. So I said, fuck this, I'm leaving. And I started going and staying with my mom. And at the time, my mom was staying in a hotel room, like, being a maid to work for her rent. I save up enough money and I get us a little apartment. At the same time, my baby mama's mom and her sister, they went to the Women's Resource Center, the place I talked about earlier, and got them a place. So I get this place. We're doing our normal thing at this point. I'm just doing enough shit to get by, but I got a paycheck. So it's not like I need to hustle or do anything crazy to support our habit. We find out she's pregnant again with my daughter. So this time going all right. Like we eventually have the baby. We lose that place too and start staying with my mom. We were dealing with social services so much in that county we were in that we were about to get our daughter. They were going to take her too if we didn't leave. So, we start staying with my mom, and this is when, my baby mama, she starts getting a lot of her trouble is catching up with her. She had, a lot of petty larcenies, a lot of possessions. She was put on probation for a lot of shit. And this is back, like I guess you could say 10 or 15 years ago, they were still giving a lot of time for probation violations. And on her first one, we had just had the baby, she got 2 years. That made it to where, my mom has pretty much got the baby full time. We're living in a different town now. We're living in Blacksburg. If anybody knows where that is, where Virginia Tech is, I get a little job at this place called DP2. They make calzones. Everything going good there for the most part. There's nothing really crazy that happens there. I'm just, still using ice. I get on the suboxone program at that point. So that starts helping a lot. At one point, there's about 2 years where life is just going like that. And I'm taking care of my daughter. Eventually, my mom, this is the story. All right. This is where I get these charges for this assault, and I get this 3 months and weekends, right? I do my first couple weekends, and while doing these weekends, like I'm trying to prepare, and it's a little rinky dink county jail, like Andy Griffith, like smoking big blunts before going in there like a dumbass. While I'm in there, one of the times there's lockers where you put to do the weekends, your clothes, your shoes, and stuff, and they actually tore apart those lockers with a dog just to find my sweatshirt that smelled like butt. After that, that's when a lady comes up to the bars and she says, "All right, how much time's everybody got left? If you got a nonviolent offense and you got $155, we could sign you up for house arrest for the rest of your time." All right, I'm like, hell yeah, bet. End up letting me out that next morning. They're like, "Just come back later today with that money order of that $150. Well, I call them and I'm like, I can't get it today. Can I bring it Tuesday? And I bring it Tuesday, and sure enough, they piss test me and reel me back in for the rest of my time.
Did they keep your money?
Yeah, no, they didn't keep my money. I was
Okay.
able to sign it out to my dad. But, once I got out, this pretty much starts a time where, my mom is living in a Super 8 motel. And I'm pretty sure Super 8s are pretty similar all over the country. A shady place filled with crime and opportunity for crime and substance use and just, unsavory people. But, all right. So, I'm staying at this hotel and with my mom. I had just got out, and shit's not looking good. I don't have a job. I'm not necessarily strung out, but I haven't done anything about my recovery. And it's my mom, my stepdad, and my kid in a hotel room. So, I'm basically wandering the streets forever. Just it's not a good time. All the time passes. My baby mama, she gets out, and at this point we're at a bad place in our relationship, and shit is just tragic, where it's just trauma. And at this point, she had got out, and she had a lot of relationships while she was in there. She might get mad if I say this, but it's something I wanted to talk about. She was gay for the stay, and I had to deal with that shit. So
So how was that? How'd you figure that out?
like I eventually one time when I was in jail, I seen the people going to court, and I was like, tell my wife I love her, and they were like, they said another girl's name, they were like, we gonna tell her you said that. And I already had an idea, shit was going on. But even to this day, when I bring it up, she laughs it off like it wasn't serious. But at the time, that shit was serious to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, that had made me have a lot of resentment towards her when she came home. And, I'm just not doing good. While, she had just got out after doing this 2 years, she gets another warrant for like some old shit for an indictment that pretty much makes it to where we're bouncing from place to place, staying with her uncle. I got nothing to offer. It's just like I'm with her. We're living off what people smoke with us and shit. It's not a good time. But eventually, she gets that COVID money. Shit's good for a week. We're getting high as fuck and stuff, and then she's with my cousin going to re-up, and she gets locked up again. And this time, I'm fucking. She gets her the COVID money, which was 12 grand. And like the couple weeks before that, we had spent like close to five on bullshit. She said so she had seven left to get a paid lawyer. When they caught her with a grip of shit. They caught her with scales. They caught her with different types of substances, and she was on the run, and she had used a fake name, and she had got away with the fake name one other time. So she had another warrant for false identity to law enforcement. So she just racked up this book of charges, and she goes to court. She gets 3.5 years.